by the vast majority of definitely journalists. The journalists would not even know what I'm going to be talking about. Now, what's happened is that we are having a complete collapse of the existing system of rule through the financial system. We're having a complete collapse of this globally extended free trade, Adam Smith, so-called financial capitalist economy. It's completely disintegrating before your eyes. People in general are caught up in the process of the habits of existing within that system. But it is collapsing. And what is also occurring is an entirely new system emerging before your very eyes. And very few people understand that and understand the significance of that. And now the fundamental issue emerging in the new system as opposed to the old system is centered around how do we define economic value. In the old system, economic value is defined by supply and demand in the market. Whatever price you're willing to pay is the value of the good. Period. And everything is measured in monetary values because you have a market and you have supply and you have demand, and people will pay up to a certain, depending on the demand and the supply. And that's the value. That's value. And if you can get someone to work for less and you make a profit, that's also value. And that's the profit, that's also value. And so that system, which is not the way any nation really developed, it's a system of empire, is now collapsing. Totally. Now, this core issue has been the central issue of all of Lyndon LaRouche's economic investigations and discoveries going back to the late 40s and early 50s. How do you define value? Now, LaRouche defined it early on as the increase in the productive powers of labor and the increase in that context of the power of the increase of potential population density. In other words, you define the value of something not by what people are willing to purchase it for, but to what degree is that part of a system of consumption and production that either improves or collapses the system of value of the productive power of labor, or increases the potential population power of the society. Can the society increase its power to have a larger population? And that's what he came to the conclusion in the late 40s and early 50s. And the value of something is defined by its relationship to that. In other words, the value of $100,000 of cocaine consumption versus the value of $100,000 worth of, let's just say, grain production of food, are not equivalent. The value of the $2 quadrillion worth of derivatives has no value in the context of the reality of society. It has no value. Why does it have value? Because the people running the system says it has value. That's why. And they're saying, and they created a whole system of gambling to go with it. And but they say it has value. But does it have actual value? No, it doesn't. Okay. Yeah.
Can I move you again? Because this is
okay.
Yeah. This will be better for you. Just right underneath this.
Like this.
No, just straight.
Okay, all right. Okay, so now that issue that LaRouche began to explore back in the late 40s and early 50s is what is emerging in this system that's emerging because the old system is dead, and that new system that's coming in around the BRICS, Brazil, India, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That new system is not defining value as money. They're not. They're not creating another monetary system. The BRICS countries are not creating another monetary system in which to trade. They're not doing that. They are defining value as that which dramatically increases the power of the productive powers of the population. That's how they define value. And so, to them, building a canal, building a railway, building a nuclear power plant is value. It's changing the power of the society to produce, and thereby lifting the population up and increasing the actual value of everybody's labor in so doing. The prices of things today now mean nothing. There are prices, but that doesn't tell you what it's actually worth. What is it actually worth? Okay? When Argentina defaulted in the early part of the last decade, what was the value of Argentina's debt? It was nothing. But what is the value of the negotiated debt that Argentina has created since then? Well, its value is based upon the increasing power of Argentina's economy. That's where the value of that debt is today. This is not the debt recognized by Judge Grisa in New York and the vulture funds. They didn't accept the reduction of the value of that debt because Argentina was destroyed as a nation. So instead, they said, no, we do not agree with your concept of value, Mr. Kirchner, and now Mrs. Fernandez de Kirchner. We don't agree with your concept of value. A debt is a debt is a debt is a debt, and so forth and so on. So now, what is going on? What is going to happen to all those things that have no value as the system comes down? Well, they're going to get wiped out. What is going to happen to those things that have value? Well, there's going to be a huge adjustment of what their price is going to be. But their price is not going to be determined by the market forces. There'll be markets and stuff like that, so you can do business. But that's not how it's going to be fundamentally determined. What prices these things will have will not be determined by a monetary system, per se. That system has now ended for all time. That global, neoliberal, British empiricist system is finished for all time. This is bigger than the collapse of the Berlin Wall. This is like 100 times bigger than the collapse of the Berlin Wall. Now, how the system is emerging around the BRICS in the context is occurring in the context of warfare. Okay? Why? Because as the system collapses, the power that still resides in that system has no intention of allowing another system to come into being. And within the system that's collapsing, there are elements who would rather have the world get wiped out in a nuclear war or an epidemic than have another system come in with a different concept of what value is. So, now what has become very apparent is that increasingly the leadership of Russia is turning to the people that have this conception. The leadership of China is turning to their experts who have this conception. And now, recently, the leadership of India is turning to people who have this conception. Their conception is what's guiding this whole thing. In other words, they're not looking at this thing as in the Ukraine or the situation in Palestine or the situation in the Middle East. They're not looking at it as an isolated phenomenon. They're looking at it in the context of the whole collapse of the system. And they understand, or they're increasingly beginning to understand, that the solution is not deploying military forces per se, or having a war, but the solution lies in replacement, an efficient replacement with a reliable system, with a different concept of value. A good example of this is the country of Argentina under Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. She's retaliating against the vulture funds by going after HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. They're under investigation now for criminal activity. What are they doing? They're helping people falsify all of their invoices and evading taxes and so on and so forth. They have all these very complicated products that they're selling that which allow, and so they're going after these guys. And Kirchner understands. For Christina, she understands what I'm talking to you about because they lived through it. Her husband and her lived through this, and they understand, and they don't have a problem saying that this system is finished. You have another example of what's going on. You had this great meeting of foreign ministers in Myanmar, which used to be called Burma, and all the Asian representatives were there, and the U.S. sent Secretary John Kerry there, and the Chinese were there to promote what? The Asian Development Infrastructure Development Bank. And they're telling all these Asian countries, chip in, get a piece of it, be part of it, work with it. This is not the IMF. This is not the World Bank. It's a whole different thing. Okay. And South Korea, of all things, and Thailand are on board to join. John Kerry, instead, was trying to get the Asian delegations to pass a resolution condemning China for their aggressive behavior in the South China Seas. Nobody was interested. And then, because of his overdue of organizing this, he showed up at the meeting with the Chinese a half hour late. He was reprimanded by the Chinese for showing up a half hour late. That's the different world that we're going into. Okay? Now, take the Russia-India situation. Russia and India are speeding up the development jointly of a third-generation fast breeder reactor, which will include a thorium component. And that fast breeder reactor will breed its own fuel and breed fuel for other nuclear reactors, so it's self-sufficient. Are they listening to Prince Charles? Are they listening to Prince Philip? No. Are they listening to, to all these scientists? No. They're going ahead with it. They're doing it. They're going to have it done by 2020. Okay? Now, but the big one that's really rocking the planet is this. Chinese have put a lunar rover on the surface of the moon. Why are the Chinese going back to the moon? Why are they wasting all that money? Why are they wasting all that effort? Gee, what are the Chinese doing? Well, they plan to have another one go up before the end of this year. But what are they going to do with that? Well, they're going to test going around the moon and coming back. And also, I don't know if they're going to land something and bring it back or not. But what are they planning? They're planning to set up a capability to process the dirt of the moon to obtain helium-3 and bring it back to Earth. Because helium-3 is the easiest and most efficient and effective way to achieve fusion power. We know we can do it with helium-3. Now, what does that mean? That means that you have an energy source with a temperature that can ionize any matter on the planet. And you can use magnetic fields to separate it out. The lasers you have to develop will revolutionize medicine. The power you're going to be able to generate with one space shuttle load of this stuff, the power of the whole country for a year. The power you're going to generate this can be used at those high temperatures. It's a lot easier to desalinate seawater. You can massively desalinate seawater. You can do materials processing. You are no longer confined to having to find a deposit somewhere with certain density of the element. You don't have to do that anymore. You have it wherever you have the ocean. You can get the minerals out of the ocean. You can get it out of your backyard. I mean, what does that mean for geopolitics? What does it mean for strategy of control? Petroleum games. Control. How do we control you? Oh, we control you because you need energy. You need energy. Where are you going to get the energy? You don't have any railways connected anywhere. You have to pay us. You have to pay the system. You have to pay whatever. No, we control you. We control your amount of energy you have access to. No, this is coming to an end. And we're not talking 100 years from now. We're talking 10 years from now. And the Chinese are doing it. And guess what? The Russians intend to do it with them as well. And the Indians intend to do the same. So what does that mean? What kind of world are you going to be living in? What kind of world is it's the overthrow of the entire conception of the world that people have, far more profound than anything we have experienced up to now. Like the people of Europe, when they figured out that there was this other place and they could go colonize it and that the world was actually not what they thought it was a revolution in Europe. This is far bigger. This is on a much greater scale. Okay. So, now I'm not going into a lot of detail here because I want to. Now, this just came up, and this is a direct result of what I'm talking about. Iran, of all places, has proposed, just yesterday, to become the second I in the BRICS. So it's BRIICS. They say the BRICS can benefit greatly from Iran, and Iran can benefit greatly from the BRICS. Not only that, it's a wonderful way to deal with all of the sanctions that have been imposed upon them. And it will allow them to develop a lot quicker, and they'll help other countries develop a lot quicker. Well, what do we have in the BRICS? We have South Africa, which is a mess, right? They're going to be helped by this. You have Brazil, which is another mess. They're going to be helped by this. Then you have Iran, you have China, you have India, you have Russia. They are not in any way similar culturally, but they are coming around this concept of development. Now, here comes the shocker. Egypt. General al-Sisi announced on the 5th of August that they're going to build a new canal, new Suez Canal. And they're going to connect, the Suez Canal is like 37 kilometers. They're going to build a new channel for 35 of it, and then they're going to do something else. And they're going to build all these 3 major ports, all this economic, industrial activities that we're going to get there. Did he go to the World Bank for this? Did he go to London, Frankfurt, Wall Street, or any of these other places? No. The digging is already started. 7,500 people and shovels are already digging. In a week or two, there's going to be 15,000 people involved. The project was originally scheduled to be a 3-year project. 1 year. He doesn't want to mess around. Because he knows there's millions of unemployed Egyptians. And he's got to get these people working. Otherwise, what else is there going to be? What else are they going to do? But fester and be angry and be ticked off? He's got to get them working. So how is this? How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay? Where's the money going to come from? I mean, you need money for that, right? You need to go into debt for that, right? Egypt's already indebted. How are they going to do it? Well, the only people who are allowed to work on this project are Egyptians. 40 companies are now under the military direction. There'll be 65 under the military direction. How are they going to pay for it? Well, Egyptian banks next week are going to be offering bonds to pay for it. But you have to be an Egyptian citizen to buy the bond. So the people of Egypt, instead of spoiling their money away in Europe, our currencies got too much inflation. We got to hold our money in dollars. Right? They're going to take the currency of the country and they're going to buy these bonds. Why? Because they have a nice return. It's not dollars. It's the national currency of Egypt, which is worthless as far as the rest of the world is concerned. Or relatively worthless as far. They're going to do it in their own currency. And then later on, they'll say, well, you can put in $1,000 bonds. 10 lira. Egyptian lira. 100 lira. 1,000 lira. Those are the denominated. What is that? That's Lincoln. That's greenbacks. Al-Sisi is doing Lincoln's greenbacks to build up, to start a massive construction of Egypt, not just for the canal, but for the diverting of the water for this particular river valley that they're trying to set up for agriculture. What would have happened to Al-Sisi if he tried this, if Egypt had tried this a few years ago? There would have been, human rights violations, there would have been everything, there would have been financial assaults, there would have been all that stuff going on. But it's not happening that way. Why? Because of the BRICS, because there's a new situation, a new game in town. And what does this mean? Egypt has over 80 million people. It's the most significant country in that whole region. The 3 most significant countries are Egypt. So, what does this mean? This is revolutionary. What if Egypt can do it? Why can't every country do it? Why can't every country do the same thing? where's the monetary system? There is no monetary. They're using the currency of the country. They're creating debt, but the debt is connected to the actual physical construction of. This is the way they built the United States. They did it that way. The railways, the infrastructure were built on this basic principle. They can go to the international banks to get loans to build anything. So, now let's go to the Russian situation. How is Putin moving? Putin knows that this whole thing in Ukraine is the last gasp of a dying empire. What does he want to do? Does he want to go in and invade and do all that? No. He wants to crush the empire. Because you have to crush the empire if you're going to have a human survival. So how is he doing that? How is he moving to do that? Well, he's not on his own, but how is he moving to do that? They want to play sanctions? Okay, we'll play sanctions. We're now cutting off. We're now sanctioning all those countries. We're now boycotting all of the products that's coming in to Russia from the sanctioned countries. Okay. So all these European countries that it's all export. Exports. This is Russia's buying our stuff, right? And what is Russia getting in return? What are they giving? What is Russia doing? They're using their dollars, right? They're using their dollars, using whatever. So now why did Russia do this? Because Russia is moving out of the system and is moving into the new system. And who are they going to? Turkey. They're going to China. They're going to South America. They're going to all these other countries that didn't do the sanctions and that are part of the emerging BRICS. And so what does this mean? This means that Europe is sitting there. Europe's only possibility for economic survival is breaking out of the control. Italy has to break out of the control. Germany has to break out of the control. France has to break out of the control. If they want to survive economically, they have to do that. And work with the other countries for exports. Europe can't survive without an export market. And the export is where the growth is, and the growth is going to be in the rest of the world. So the Europeans are not done. They know that it's the end. And the question is, do they want to commit suicide with the British who are running it? And they're the stewards of the British Obama. Okay. No. So don't be surprised if the next network to break is Italy and Germany and France. Because they want to survive. So this is the way the BRICS nations are playing it. They're not playing a game. They're playing. They realize that this empire can't survive, and it has to be properly taken down, and the war has to go forward. And it's not an imperial world anymore. It's what they call a multipolar world, where you don't have an empire. You have countries working on agreements with each other based on their development. Now, in the United States, we're now in touch with people at the highest level who are realizing, who we used to talk to, or we've talked to over the years, they're now realizing that they have to do the same with the United States. They have to change. And now the discussion is, what is real value? Is all this crap that we're bailing out real value? No. Glass-Steagall, yes. But how do you define real value, and how do you define creating the credit to unleash the power of the population and the potential that you have that's being destroyed by the current system? So that's the context that I want to present to you. And this is happening now. This is a process that's happening now. It's not in the media. It's not on the Fox News or whatever. It's not on CNN. This is the process that's going on. So this is goes back to the late 40s and 50s. And then LaRouche created a movement in the late 60s. And in the late 70s, all these basic ideas went to the international community, and Gandhi, and they moved with some of it, but it got crushed. Today, the opportunity has come, as well as the necessity, to abandon the dying system with a new system based on a new concept of value. And that is what is going on as we speak. So the once mighty Colossus, the people that were quarreling after the collapse of the Soviet Union, saying we were at the end of history, is now going down. And the issue is precisely what I'm laying out. And so this is the revolution. And now I'm going to digress into a short presentation on the China aspect of it. And how this brings two different traditions which fundamentally have historically placed a value on human life and human beings. Somewhat of a sacred value on human beings, as opposed to an oligarchical system which looks at people basically as slaves or serfs or whatever. And these two systems, these two traditions, one is in Europe and one is in China, in Asia. I'm going to quickly go into the China aspect of it, and so people get a sense of this. Okay, I don't have a screen, but but I'm not going to go into a lot of depth. But I just want to get some key ideas across here. Okay. Basically, in the period between around 700 BC and 250 BC, both in Europe and in China, you had all kinds of different philosophies emerge, a discussion of who is man, what what kind of government we should have, what kind of philosophy is the best philosophy to follow, and all of that. And in China, you had different schools of philosophy emerge, and you had a similar thing in Europe. And there's some parallels between the two. In China, you had a lot of different schools emerge of different kinds of philosophy, but during the period of the empire, which lasted of the Qin Empire, was 221 to 206 BC. They burned all of them. Only a few of them survived that we know of. Now, but the problem that the Chinese were dealing with is the same problem universally that all societies have to deal with, which is, how do you maintain a productive society so you don't have to invade your neighbors and take what they have because you're not creating enough for yourself? Well, if you have people that want opulence beyond the means of the society, then they have to invade other societies. But how do you keep that corruption from taking over and so forth? These are the kind of issues that Plato was talking about in the Republic. Well, in China, you had the following traditions. You had the Confucian tradition, you had the Taoist tradition, you had something called the legalist tradition, you had something also called the agriculturalist tradition, and you had a folk beliefs called the yin and the yang. That's very important because that's a part of the Chinese culture. And what happened was the emperor, the guy who created this empire through force, was so brutal that he wanted to make everybody the same. And his doctrine was a legalist doctrine, and that legalist doctrine believed that people were basically rotten to the core, and they had to have total imposition. They had to be crushed, and they had to have it imposed upon them. And you had to have a complete autocracy imposed on them. And they created this thing in like 20 years, which was the biggest empire the world ever seen. But the population was in revolt by the end of it, within the 20 years that it was going. Actually, 15 years. When it was growing, the population was in revolt. So the peasant general who took over, and I'm not going to list any names because I have to look for the names. The peasant general took over, didn't have any philosophy. So he kept the legalist system, but he said, we're going to be more moderate about it. So then came his successors, said, well, you know, we got to be not so harsh on people. So they combined the legal system with something called the Taoist system. Now, the Taoist system is sort of a kind of, you know, system where you kind of let the natural things take, you know, natural process. It's a laissez-faire kind of system. You know, you kind of let nature take its course. You don't, you know. And the problem with one is the legal system is completely autocratic and destructive. And the problem with the other is it allows a lot of, it doesn't have a standard of it sort of let your urges kind of, you know, let things kind of roll. So it allows for a lot of corruption. People tend to get corrupt and society tends to collapse that way. Now, this other tradition, which has played the most important role in Chinese history, the Confucian tradition, is very different. And again, I'm doing this very quick. It has 5 basic principles, and let me find it right here. Okay, there's 5 basic principles. But first of all, we have this concept of heaven, which is sort of a concept of the one, a concept of the all, or the universe. And what they believe in is that Confucianism is a philosophy. It doesn't worship. It has a concept of God, but it doesn't worship God. Okay? And they believe that all of this is for man. In other words, human beings, it all belongs to man, mankind as a whole. It doesn't belong to the animals. It doesn't belong to the trees. It doesn't belong to some ethereal thing up there. It all is there for mankind as a whole, as a one. And that human beings have to be governed by a sense of righteousness and justice. They have to be governed by a sense of what's right and what's wrong, and of justice. And that we need certain kinds of rites, that is, certain kinds of rituals that will promote an emotion of reverence for what's right, for ancestors. You know, a certain reverence. And that a person of integrity is what you desire, a person of knowledge, a person of integrity. And their idea of the ruler is very different. It's the ruler is responsible for keeping a harmony between man and the universe. And when the ruler acts out, everything goes into a disharmony and everything collapses. And so to the Chinese, when they see their ruler, they don't see like a dictator. They see somebody who has the responsibility of behaving in such a way that the society has a principled orientation. So the issue is, how do you maintain that in a world where people, you know, do all kinds of weird things and so on and so forth? So how do you do that? So what the Confucians believe is that the best person to administer the government are scholars, not generals not businessmen, not merchants, not uneducated peasants, but scholars. And so, because they believed that the scholars could be developed, it could have these kind of principles, and that could check and provide harmony and so forth and so on. So the Confucian idea is very opposite to this idea of the power goes to the fittest and all of that. So it's this idea that learned and educated scholars are who have developed their minds and developed their capabilities are the best source for administering the functions of government. So now the crisis occurred in the Han Dynasty, which succeeded this 15-year imperial system. And there was a guy whose father died, and whose grandfather died, and then his father died, and it was under the control of his grandmother. And he was looking for a different way. And he sent out he wanted to hear other opinions. And the first people who came to meet with, the grandmother rounded them up and had them all commit suicide in jails. So that didn't work out. So then he wanted some writing and he got this one guy wrote to him. This one Confucian scholar wrote to him. And this is very interesting. And he said, to this person, okay, I'll just quote you for the growth and what happened, and how this plays into the future history of China. He said, the previous empire ravished the people of the world by following it, which created chaos upon chaos. The enduring poison of that system persists to this day. It has made the customs of the people coarse and evil. The people lie and cheat. They are presumptuous and disobedient. So far has the rottenness penetrated. Confucius said, rotten wood cannot be carved, a wild manure cannot be whitewashed. And then he said, but China, like rotten wood or wild manure, though you wish to govern well, there is no way you can do it under the existing system. In other words, you cannot govern your society as the emperor, which he was in the process of becoming, under this current situation. You pour forth laws and outrages spring up. You send down ordinances and deceit arises. This is like cooling a boiling pot with hot water or using sticks to beat out a fire. Things only become worse. Let me take it. And then he says, the poetry says, this is Confucius, serve the people, serve the gentleman. The scholar is. Blessing shall come down from heaven. If you govern so as to serve the people, blessings will surely come from heaven. What a true king should cultivate are the 5 norms that I just told you about. When these 5 are embellished, blessings will come down from heaven, and the magic of the spirits will assist you. The power of your grace will extend beyond the borders and reach all over the things. Recall that the emperor was at this time waiting and patient. And again, one further quote here. He said, he called for the establishment of an academy. It's the first time this has been proposed in history, as far as I know. An academy is a gateway of worthy gentlemen and a source of the transformation of the proper teaching. At the present time, with the entire population of a command for a kingdom, there is not one single person suitable to respond to an imperial call for candidates. That is because the kingly way has been cut off. I wish your majesty to erect a central academy and appoint enlightened teachers to it in order to nurture the gentlemen of the world. They should be periodically tested in order to push them to the limit of their abilities. If this is done, it should be possible to recruit the flower of the empire's youth. At present, the officers of the state and so forth. So, he proposes, and this guy, this emperor Wu, he adopted this family. And so you began the process of trying to create the leadership of the society based upon a principle of learning. And it's based on Confucius, but it's a principle of learning. And that academy concept was communicated in the early 1700s to Wilhelm Gottfried Leibniz, I believe, who was dealing with a problem in Europe. And the Jesuits had basically sent him all of their he got a hold of all the Jesuits' notes on their experiences in China. And so he proposed an academy, a scientific academy. You know, so Russia has that today, and I think other places have it as well. And it's based on Leibniz. So now, as you go through the dynasties, what happens is they collapse eventually, and then there's a period of chaos, and eventually a new dynasty emerges, and they find that it's impossible to keep the society together if they don't go back to a Confucian orientation and the training and education of scholars. And so you go into these dynasties. You have the big ones are after the Han Dynasty, which ends around 220. You have the Shang Dynasty. You have the Tang Dynasty, which goes from 600 to 900. So you have a 400-year period of different things, but it doesn't really consolidate until about 618. And then that collapses by 907. And then another dynasty emerges called the Song Dynasty, which lasts until 300 years. And then that collapses. Then you have another period of crisis, and then you have the Mongols coming in, and then you end up with another dynasty around 1368, which is the Ming Dynasty, and then that collapses, and then you get another dynasty, which is the last dynasty before the modern period, which is the Qing Dynasty. The Qing Dynasty, and in each case, there's a Confucian revival, which was essential for the society to function. Now, during this whole period, China was undergoing scientific and technological progress. But scientific and technological progress was not the primary focus of China's history, but it was occurring. And China was, up until the time of around 1600s, was always the most advanced civilization on the planet. And India was second. And because of that, they had also the largest populations, as did India. And it was only when Europe had the scientific breakthrough, which unfortunately was using an imperial way, a colonial imperial way, to try to conquer the world through maritime, through the ocean. But only in that period did actually European civilization economically eclipse China and also India. So, it is very important for people to know this, that because the Renaissance was created, the scientific and technological potential for this empire, European-based empire. However, which was opposed by the United States. It was opposed by the United States until it got taken out over recently, completely. But that's going to change. The situation with China is that they went through this process at the end of a dynasty where the British came in, the opium wars, all of that stuff. And coming into the modern period, they were looking for a way to bring China into the modern world. And they were trying to figure out what the distinction was. Now, a lot of times, the Chinese revolutionaries would say Confucian culture is the problem. Confucian culture is the problem. That's why we're backward. Right? And that was true for the nationalists as well. Less so for the nationalists, more for the communists. And then what happened was Mao decided to eliminate Confucius. And he went back to the legalist system of trying to create a uniform person, a noble peasant. And he had the Cultural Revolution, and at the end of the Cultural Revolution, he went all out to eliminate Confucius altogether from the culture. And the society completely collapsed. It was horrible. And when finally the dust settled after Mao died and the Gang of Four were dumped, Deng Xiaoping emerged as the leader. And then he started a Confucian regarding. Because that's the only way he could create a culture by which China could survive and bring back Confucian. And there's been a gradual Confucian revival since then. Now, one of the things Deng said in 78, he said, whatever I do in this world, nothing is going to matter unless we commit to creating a massive number of scientists and engineers. The only salvation for China is to go with science and technology development. There's no other way that China can become truly a nation. So the Chinese have been embarked since then, the last 36 years, on a science mission, science development, scientific development. And this has been increased by the current president. And what you also have, and this people don't notice, is that you have a massive upsurge of interest in European classical music. European classical music is declining in the United States and Europe. But in China, there's millions and millions of people learning to play the violin. There's millions and millions of people getting involved in orchestras or getting involved in classical European culture. So that's so I brought this up because the European tradition is based in Christianity. It's based in Plato, not Aristotle, Plato, and St. Augustine, and Charlemagne was the representative of that, and then later the Renaissance, and which brought back Plato and so forth. And that culture culminated in the creation of the United States and the creation of the modern nation state. So you have the idea of the modern nation state as one idea, but then you have in China, you have not concept of a modern nation state as such, but you have a concept of a civilization. So it's a little different, but they have a concept of a civilization, and they've been a civilization for 8,000 years, and they've never collapsed completely because they never were really going around invading their neighbors too much. So that was never their orientation. So the Chinese want to be Chinese. They want the world to develop. They want stability. They don't want chaos. That's the big thing with the Chinese. They don't want wars. They don't want chaos. They don't want this thing in Ukraine to become World War III. They don't want the thing in the Middle East to become World War III. That's the Chinese orientation. No, we don't want that. We'll work with the United States. We'll work with whoever we're willing to work with us for economic development. But we don't want the chaos. And so that's their basic orientation. They're very worried about the Ukrainians. The Chinese are probably more worried about the Ukrainian situation than the Russians right now. But anyhow, that's kind of what that's all about. So to wrap it up and then open it up for questions before Matt comes on with something else, I'll open it up for questions. There's probably more actions later. I'm sorry I talked with you at all. It really wasn't very good. Go ahead.
It was good.
the reference you made to the Confucian ideology in China, the new leadership they have now, they are oriented to the academy type.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
But you have to understand, the current leadership of China has gone through a lot of suffering. And I think, to some degree, suffering makes people wiser. Because you take the current leader of China, he was a Red Guard. He was in the Red Brigade. And they were like imprisoning people like his father, who was on the standing committee later. And so you have all these people. What Mao did is he took all of the intellectuals, all the people who had knowledge, and when Mao came in, okay, let me just do the Mao thing real quick. Mao was a genius propagandizer and brainwasher of the poorest of the peasants. And he created a peasant army. There were very few educated people in his operation, but he was extremely disciplined. Extremely disciplined. They would not allow any looting of peasants. They would not allow any rape or anything like that. They were very strict. And they were a disciplined army, but they were composed of peasants. And they won the revolution for reasons I can't go into completely. But when Mao walked into Beijing to make it his capital for the new China, there was no idea. He had not one concept of economics. He had no idea what to do economically. And he handed it over to a few of the educated people, Li Shaoxi and Li Shaoxi's junior was Deng Xiaoping. And they didn't know what to do, so they went to Russia because I went to the Soviet Union because that was their only chance, and they began the industrial transformation of China based on a Russian model. And so by 1950, 1960, they actually established a certain capability. And Mao said, why are we having this revolution for this? We're creating a managerial class. We're creating the very thing we strove to eliminate. So then they launched the Cultural Revolution. And all these people, all the intelligentsia, all of the educated people were forced to go into the countryside and become re-educated. All of them. And they had middle school kids running around killing people. It was wild. And they collectivized agriculture. The Chinese don't want to be collective. The Chinese don't. But he forced everybody into collective. And agriculture, everything collapsed. And then he had these crazy gang of four going crazy. One, hate this, hate that, one hate this, one hate that, went on for years. And finally, it was over. And they decided, okay, that doesn't work. I guess we need to go back to Confucius. But this is something. But what's emerging in China is a concept of merging Confucianism with scientific progress. So that's kind of what's going on. And they do listen to the academies. So, go ahead.
Yeah. You were mentioning earlier that Egypt will issue bonds and they will get the money into the Egyptian currency, and that the Egyptian currency has absolutely no respect around the world. So my question is, where are they going to get the hard goods, the machinery, the technology in order to dig the canal? If their money is worthless to everybody else, unless they only deal with the BRICS country, and that's my question.
Well, good question. Yeah, it's a good question.
But it's not Russia, haven't they?
Okay, yeah. That's one place. But what they're doing is they're taking the existing capability that they already have and they're putting it to work. And then once they get the project going, they're going to offer bids for foreign contractors to come in and do specific things if they want to be part of it. But they're going to run it. The important thing is this, is that they have the bricks to back them up, basically. And there's one other feature of this that I should have mentioned, and I didn't mention it, is that it's primarily going to be Egypt's job, primarily, to organize a resolution of the Middle East situation. The United States could forget it on this. Obama wants to send in troops now, and he's already started bombing Iran. And it's totally illegal. He's not asking Congress. But it wouldn't matter. They're not going to stop ISIS. They're not going to stop ISIS by just bombing them and sending American troops in. They don't want to anyway. Exactly. But Egypt's another story. The reason there's a ceasefire in Gaza right now is because of Egypt. Egypt putting pressure on Israel. Okay. Why can Egypt do that? Because they're a nation of 80+ million people in that region. Okay. And they are not Islamic fundamentalism. They are not at this moment gripped with sectarian issues. And if anybody starts to resolve the situation, it's going to be Egypt working with Iran and drawing Turkey in at a certain point. They're going to have to draw Turkey in. And by the way, Russia is going to Turkey for food, and Turkey's going along. So Turkey did not participate in the sanctions against Russia. They're smarter, a little smarter on that, at least on that front. They have a crazy prime minister. So that's getting off the subject. But the main thing is that the solution to that area is going to come from the resolution of that area is going to come from a commitment to economic development of that region.
I would just say one thing, because this is a very similar problem that Abraham Lincoln also faced. When none of these financiers wanted to lend any credit because they were saying, look, you're a country that's going into civil war. You're not an economically viable investment. You're going to tank anyway. So if we're going to loan you anything, it'll be at 30% interest or more.
Right.
So that's where Lincoln, his leading economists,
and the secretary came up with the real solution by going to the Constitution.
And simply recognizing that right there, it gives that's an economic document that gives the authority to the government to issue bonds, and the greenbacks were tied to these for specific projects that involve the transcontinental rail and all these other things, right?
Right.
Which this is a very similar process where the necessity forces the nation to adopt a common solution.
What I said before you left, and this is important, is that Egypt is the one playing the peacemaker role in that whole region at this point. They're the ones intervening on the Saudis. They're the ones intervening on Turkey, trying to work out a relationship with Turkey. They're the ones who got the Israelis to do a ceasefire. It's Egypt which is actually playing a crucial role now in potentially stabilizing that region. And this is also very important. Al-Sisi was invited to be present at Obama's African summit. He refused to go. And he went to Russia and he refused. No, I mean, why deal with this guy? I mean, why deal with him? What are you going to get out of him? Nothing. Just ignore him. Go to Russia. Go ahead.
I have one question. I guess the start of the Suez Canal project, would that be sort of similar in the way it's being done right now to how the Russia would be done here? And also, on that topic, are the BRICS potentially looking at Morocco as something we would wish to approach North America as a solution?
Okay. The problem is this. We ran out of time. So the whole thing with Nawaba is going to be superseded by a fusion-based economy. So in other words, we're going to leapfrog. So the whole Nawaba concept is now not exactly what it was because we have these droughts setting in, we have these crises. NWAPA will not be, okay, NWAPA is the North American Water Power Alliance, and that's the thing that was originally planned to be constructed and starting in the 60s and finished in the 70s and 80s, and it would have brought water down from Alaska down to Canada and to all of North America. It was a huge project that was there. Kennedy was pushing, and it never went. And now we're looking at that, and we're looking at a much diminished productive economy that it really is going to have to leapfrog. And yes, the WAPA can be done, but it will be done in the context of a fusion-based economy.
And is that more or less what the Egyptians also kind of do in terms of bringing it over to making sure it's mostly like local nationalizing, and after that offering the...
I wouldn't make those kind of comparisons. I'd just say that in Egypt, they have this massive unemployment problem. They're chronic unemployment problem. And this is an Egyptian. This is the only way Al-Sisi is going to survive anyhow as president of Egypt. He's not going to survive. He has to get all these people back. And so that's but the concept is we don't. The concept is a concept of value. It's not in the money. It's in getting these people to work. It's in getting the job done. It's in creating the wealth. That's what the concept of value is. It's not in the money. It's not in the market. More jobs, and then people have more stability. People have more optimism. They don't take their money outside the country. They have incredible potential for growth. Why? What does Egypt have? They have a relatively advanced culture. They have a relatively advanced educated population. They just have extreme poverty. Well, what else do they have? They have a lot of young people. India has a lot of young people. And so whatever you do now, it's a long-term payoff. I mean, you're talking a long-term payoff. So this is, So that's...
Doesn't Egypt have the capability to be the agricultural giant of the world?
Who?
Egypt?
I don't know.
But the weather they have the water, the Nile.
If they have the water, sure.
With nuclear power, you can do...
Desalinization, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I assume you were talking about helium-3 earlier. I assume this is present on Earth.
No,
It's
in
not.
very rare quantities. And in order to produce it on Earth, it's extremely expensive, and it's beyond our capability and cost effective.
Right. Is it radioactive?
No.
Okay.
Well, why helium-3? Because all the other fusion reactions, deuterium, tritium, etc., when you bring them together, you generate a neutron. And the neutron is what you use it's like a nuclear power plant. You use it to heat water, and that turns the turbine. But also the neutron tends to create disturbances to make it harder to do the controlled fusion. With helium-3, you don't have a neutron. You have no neutrons. All the energy is electromagnetic. That is electrons. It's just electromagnetic. What that does, it also allows you to confine it a lot easier.
So you have an atom without a neutron?
No, the reaction that fuses the helium-3 together does not generate a neutron.
It's the generating of it.
It generates a lot of energy, but no neutrons.
It's deuterium and helium-3
That's
What's
why.
good about that is too is you can now you don't have to use it specifically for boiling water to make a turbine run, which is essentially the same thing we do for hydro or coal, which is make a turbine run by boiling water. But what you're actually able to do is when you're dealing with millions of degree temperatures, which can feasibly now would be directed specifically for actions in the real time.
Also, you directly create electricity out of it.
Yeah, you can control
Directly create electricity
magnetic field
from it. It's like magnetohydrodynamics system. They could do it with coal. That's what the Russian submarines were based on. They were very quiet. They were based on magnetohydrodynamics, which is to create a plasma and then run electricity off the plasma. So anyhow, that's getting on.
So the Russian is.
project is sleep or play?
Well, no. It's not. It doesn't work that way. A lot of the early research was done in the United States. So the Chinese are working off of people. A lot of the stuff has come from the United States because the United States shut it down. Basically, we funded it. Basically, there's not much going on in the United States on it. So the Chinese have picked up the U.S. program, and they picked up a lot of the expertise, I believe, from the U.S. program.
Pure speculation, I'm sure, but will there be a program to start helium-3? I mean,
no, it's too expensive. But the moon has it.
And I know that was my first question. Like, are we gonna look up the moon and see past the moon someday, or what? But the thing is, we don't need a lot.
Well, the idea, what you do is eventually you set up a base on the moon. And you have these robots going out, digging up the dirt, heating it up, releasing all the gases. And then the gases get captured, and then the gases get cooled and separated, and out of that you get the heat.
So it's not. So you're not actually. Yeah, this is important actually. You're not changing the You're not taking mass. You're not taking mass out of the moon.
You're not sending You're actually processing it on the moon. Now the importance of this is that the moon then becomes the base for future space travel and a major resource. But controlled thermonuclear fusion is the only way you can really travel in space. You can't travel in space, really. You can go to Mars in 3 months or something like that, but that's not efficient. So a fusion spacecraft can create constant force, which means acceleration. So you go faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. You pick up speed. So you go halfway. Then you reverse the direction of the craft, and then you decelerate the other half of the way. And then what you do by the acceleration is you create internal gravity. So you have gravity the whole way, created by the force of by the acceleration of the spaceship, and then the deceleration is created gravity as well. And that's how you do it. And then you can get to Mars relatively quick, or you can go anywhere in the solar system relatively quick. Like they did this study of going to an asteroid, to study an asteroid, and it takes 8 years because you have to go around the sun twice, around the Earth once, and so on and so on. Because the asteroid's moving, while the Earth is moving, and this is an asteroid that comes close in and goes back out. So with the fusion rocket, with the fusion spacecraft, you can go there. You don't have to go around the Earth and the Sun. What have you? You can go fast enough that you can catch up to it, and so forth. So
helium-3, it's a gas.
It's in a gas form, but it would be used. We would ship it in a solid form, cool form. But on the surface of the moon, it's in a particle form because of it's cold on the surface of the moon. It's not like warm.
No, fair enough. But
and it's underneath the surface.
You may have touched on this maybe a couple of meetings, but I was wondering if you heard anything regarding Germany wanting to do, because I've actually come across a lot of articles talking about Germany secretly, essentially talking to Russia and wanting to join BRICS, and this is apparently what made the U.S. intelligence freak out and start spying on all of them. And there's more and more evidence now because Austria has also given the okay for Russia and they want to cooperate.
Right, because their economy's tied up. They're being devastated right now.
What are the chances of Germany actually doing that at the same time as Iran? Because that would basically just be that would be it.
That's a very good possibility, and that's the way Putin is playing. That's why he's not going into Ukraine.
If Germany decides to go with BRIC, there's going to be retaliation because Germany has companies throughout the world, even the U.S. saying that. So, is there a theory that there's possibly going to be retaliation if Germany, or they're just going to say, well, there it goes, that's it.
Well,
can't do anything anymore.
What's going on is within the empire that's breaking up is you have forces that are now saying, we got to give it up. We got to change. and we're witnessing that in the U.S. within the institutional layers, within some of the economic layers, within some of the financial layers that we're talking to. There's a recognition that the system is gone. That we're facing a crisis 100 times worse than 2008, and that the thing is gone. The thing is not workable. So you need to get Glass-Steagall through the U.S. Congress. You need to do all of that. But there is a process now going on in the United States among certain strata of the economic elite that is necessary at this point. So there's also happening in other parts of the world. There is a realization that this system is not worth keeping alive. I mean, you can't keep it alive. So that's the way it's being played. Okay, and Obama has to be settled out of the office. So the pressure is building to dump Obama, and there's a tremendous amount of pressure above the parties and behind the scenes to remove Obama, because there's no viability with him as president.
But the more necessary thing to do is, I mean, many people would know it, it's the banking system. It's not really the U.S. government that's running it.
Right.
It's those who influence and make decisions. Those are the people that you have to.
Right, there is.
Whatever word you want to choose.
Okay. Goldman sucks. And that crowd.
George has a sore ass.
Yeah, right. Etc. That crowd is not the only crowd in the world. In the United States. You got the Texas Federal Reserve. You got the Dallas Federal Reserve. You got the St. Louis Federal Reserve. You have a whole network of community bankers, and you have a whole network of insurance companies that independent insurance companies that come out for Glass-Steagall. You have a whole undergrowth of institutions that you don't hear about, which are moving now in this direction in the United States, and you don't hear about it. This weekend, the resolutions are going back to the conference of state legislators, the National Conference of State Legislators, now being held in Minnesota. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, our resolutions are being introduced. We have two resolutions being introduced for consideration. One is Glass-Steagall, Andrea Boland, our friend from Maine, and the Four Powers of LaRouche is also being introduced into the. And there was a huge blow-up at the last one in August last year in Atlanta, where the bankers had to come in and sit on everybody. Directly, personally, threaten everybody. This time, I don't think they can do that. They're running out of steam. And I'm not saying the resolutions will pass, or they won't pass, but that's not the point. The point is that the pressure is building, and there is a dialogue going on behind the scenes. There is a dialogue discussing what we're going to do. What are you going to do now? If the system's gone, what is the United States going to do? Are they going to just go along for the suicide, for the British Empire, or for the financial empire? No. And then the last thing is, what value does Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, all of their derivatives, everything else, what value does that have when we don't recognize its value? When Argentina doesn't recognize its value? When all of us don't recognize, oh yeah, you got derivatives, that's fine. We don't recognize that. We don't recognize it. Oh, they're yours. Keep them. They're for you. Yeah. We don't recognize them. So what happens to those institutions? They're gone. They're finished. It's all over for these people. They're just not. And they're like, they don't know what to do. The empire doesn't know what to do. Other than start World War III, they don't know what else to do. You know. Right.
I don't know if
did I kind of give you a sense of that?
Hang on, Paul. I need to just say something.
Yeah.
So I know that there's a lot going on right now, and there's a lot of questions. Matt does have a presentation prepared for tonight as well. Because sometimes I know the Q&A goes on a long time, but and they're valuable questions. So I'm wondering if I could encourage everyone, if they want to continue after Matt's presentation, to stick around and ask questions or to join us. A few of us always like to go out for some pho after, and then you can have some time to ask Paul as well and have some dialogue. There is another, I mean, Matt's presentation is 50 minutes.
Yeah, so I could feasibly do it another week.
Or we could do like something tomorrow.
I think
this is a pretty thorough conversation. Presentations.
I think we could just continue the dialogue here, because it's a kind of dialogue. Would you guys be able to stick it out?
And you're presenting on?
On the history of the discovery of radiation.
Spectrum a bit.
is turning to the people that have this conception. The leadership of China is turning to their experts who have this conception. And now, recently, the leadership of India is turning to people who have this conception. Their conception is what's guiding this whole thing. In other words, they're not looking at this thing as in the Ukraine or the situation in Palestine or the situation in the Middle East. They're not looking at it as an isolated phenomenon. They're looking at it in the context of the whole collapse of the system. And they understand, or they're increasingly beginning to understand, that the solution is not deploying military forces per se, or having a war, but the solution lies in replacement, an efficient replacement with a reliable system, with a different concept of value. A good example of this is the country of Argentina under Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. She's retaliating against the vulture funds by going after HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. They're under investigation now for criminal activity. What are they doing? They're helping people falsify all of their invoices and evading taxes and so on and so forth. They have all these very complicated products that they're selling which allow, and so they're going after these guys. And Kirchner understands, for Christina, she understands what I'm talking to you about, because they lived through it. Her husband and her lived through this, and they understand, and they don't have a problem saying that this system is finished. You have another example of what's going on. You had this great meeting of foreign ministers in Myanmar, which used to be called Burma. And all the Asian representatives were there. And the U.S. sent Secretary. Okay. So, now, that issue that LaRouche began to explore back in the late 40s and early 50s is what is emerging in this system that's emerging. Because the old system is dead. And that new system that's coming in around the BRICS, Brazil, India, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That new system is not defining value as money. They're not. They're not creating another monetary system. The BRICS countries are not creating another monetary system in which to trade. They're not doing that. They are defining value as that which dramatically increases the power of the productive powers of the population. That's how they're defining value. And so, to them, building a canal, building a railway, building a nuclear power plant is value. It's changing the power of the society to produce. and thereby lifting the population up and increasing the actual value of everybody's labor in so doing. The prices of things today now mean nothing. There are prices, but that doesn't tell you what it's actually worth. What is it actually worth? Okay? When Argentina defaulted in the early part of the last decade, what was the value of Argentina's debt? It was nothing. But what is the value of the negotiated debt that Argentina has created since then? Well, its value is based upon the increasing power of Argentina's economy to be productive. That's where the value of that debt is today. This is not the debt recognized by Judge Grisa in New York and the vulture funds. They didn't accept the reduction of the value of that debt because Argentina was destroyed as a nation. So instead, they said, no, we don't. By the vast majority of definitely journalists. The journalists would not even know what I'm going to be talking about. Now, what's happened is that we are having a complete collapse of the existing system of rule through the financial system. We're having a complete collapse of this globally extended free trade, Adam Smith, so-called financial capitalist economy. It's completely disintegrating before your eyes. People in general are caught up in the process of the habits of existing within that system. But it is collapsing. And what is also occurring is an entirely new system emerging before your very eyes. And very few people understand that and understand the significance of that. And now the fundamental issue emerging in the new system as opposed to the old system is centered around how do we define economic value. In the old system, economic value is defined by supply and demand in the market. Whatever price you're willing to pay is the value of the good. Period. And everything is measured in monetary values because you have a market and you have supply and you have demand and people will pay up to a certain, depending on the demand and the supply. And that's the value. That's value. And if you can get someone to work for less and you make a profit, that's also value. And extra profit, that's also value. And so that system, which is not the way any nation really developed, it's a system of empire, is now collapsing. Totally. Now, this core, we do not agree with your concept of value, Mr. Kirshner, and now Mrs. Fernandez de Kirshner. We don't agree with your concept of value. A debt is a debt is a debt is a debt, and so forth and so on. So now, what is going on? What is going to happen to all those things that have no value as the system comes down? Well, they're going to get wiped out. What is going to happen to those things that have value? Well, there's going to be a huge adjustment of what their price is going to be. But their price is not going to be determined by the market forces. There'll be markets and stuff like that, so you can do business. But that's not how it's going to be fundamentally determined. What prices these things will have will not be determined by a monetary system, per se. that system has now ended for all time. That global, neoliberal, British empiricist system is finished for all time. This is bigger than the collapse of the Berlin Wall. This is like 100 times bigger than the collapse of the Berlin Wall. Now, how the system is emerging around the BRICS in the context is occurring in the context of warfare. Okay? Why? Because as the system collapses, the power that still resides in that system has no intention of allowing another system to come into being. And within the system that's collapsing, there are elements who would rather have the world get wiped out in a nuclear war or an epidemic than have another system come in with a different concept of what value is. So, now what has become very apparent is that increasingly the leadership of Russia issue has been the central issue of all of Lyndon LaRouche's economic investigations and discoveries going back to the late 40s and early 50s. How do you define value? Now, LaRouche defined it early on as the increase in the productive powers of labor and the increase in that context of the power of the increase of potential population density. In other words, you define the value of something not by what people are willing to purchase it for, but to what degree is that part of a system of consumption and production that either improves or collapses the system of value of the productive power or increases the potential population power of the society. Can the society increase its power to have a larger population? And that's what he came to the conclusion in the late 40s and early 50s. And the value of something is defined by its relationship to that. In other words, the value of $100,000 of cocaine consumption versus the value of $100,000 worth of, let's just say, grain production of food, are not equivalent. The value of the $2 quadrillion worth of derivatives has no value in the context of the reality of society. It has no value. Why does it have value? Because the people running the system says it has value. That's why. And they're saying, and they created a whole system of gambling to go with it. And but they say it has value. But does it have actual value? No, it doesn't. Okay. Yeah.
Can I move you again? Because this is okay. Yeah. This will be better for you. Just right underneath this.
Like this.
No, just straight.
Okay. All right.